This is a 2024 Mustang Dark Horse, and this is a 2024 Mustang GT. Today, I'm going to be comparing how these two V8 monsters drive. I'm Aiden, and you're watching Gaudin X. Let's talk about what's under the hood of these two Mustangs. Over here, starting with the Dark Horse, it uses the same Gen 4 Coyote 5-liter V8 as the normal Mustang GT does, but the biggest difference is this makes more power. This one is about 500 horsepower, 418 pound-feet of torque, which is a 20 horsepower gain and a 3 pound-feet torque gain over the standard Mustang GT, only about 14 horsepower if you get the active exhaust on the standard Mustang GT. You have a K-brace in the Dark Horse, and you have upgraded strut towers from Ford Performance, of course, in this one. So yeah, over here on the typical standard Mustang GT, like I said, stock 480 with the active exhaust, it's 486, and you get 415 pound-feet of torque over here. The biggest difference you're going to notice on both of these compared to the Gen 3 is going to be the dual intake that you have under the hood, but that's on both of these cars. So yeah, 20 horsepower difference, 3 pound-feet of torque difference. It's not tons, but we're going to see how they perform either way. We're going to start with the Mustang GT solely because I think the Dark Horse is something we should save for last. But at least we get a baseline of what this generation of Mustang is going to be like with the 10-speed and the V8. These two have the 10-speed, not the manuals, and it wouldn't be fair if we did the manuals anyways, because this gets the MT82 and that one gets the Tremec. So to keep it as fair as possible, we're going to be using the automatics. It still makes more power than the last generation. 486, because this one has active exhaust, is a very healthy number. Still less torque than the peak of the last generation. By only 5 pound-feet is what the last generation was up by. 415 is still fine, but the Mustangs have never been extremely torquey either. So when it comes to like the Camaros and the Challengers out there with the 6.4, the Mustang's always been the one down on torque. It's never been really torquey anyways, so a 1% decrease in torque is not going to be that big of a deal. You're never going to notice that. You might notice the roughly 36 horsepower gain that you get in this one over the last generation, which is nice. And if we put our foot down just a little bit, it gets above, it gets to 7,000 RPMs pretty quickly. The 10-speed, of course, is quick, but one thing I've noticed on the 10 speeds regardless is they have fixed a lot of problems that the last generation had, such as a really, really rough shift from second to third. When you're under full throttle and you go for the upshift, it's pretty instantaneous, but when you're just cruising and you want to hit that upshift, whether your foot's off the throttle or it's barely on there, if you hit the plus paddle, it's going to take about a second and a half to get it into the next gear, which is quite annoying. But when you're under full throttle, that doesn't seem to be an issue. The downshifts, though, are nice and crispy, which is nice. Does it feel insanely faster? No. But it does feel a tiny bit peppier. The throttle response is a little better. They're very comfortable, of course. It's not going to be as stiff as the Dark Horse because that one has some stiffer suspension components on it. So this one's a little less stiff, and the tires aren't as wide on this one, which means it can feel a little loosey-goosey on the road compared to what the Dark Horse is probably going to feel like. But does it drive as well as something like a Dark Horse does? Probably not. We gotta go find out. Driving the Dark Horse, we'll put it in sport mode like the last one. And the first thing you notice is the steering in the front end of this car is so much better connected and so much stiffer than the standard Mustang GT. And the throttle response is also better. Of course, the inside of this car is just gonna be nicer. That one was a standard GT. This one is a Dark Horse Premium. But another cool thing in the Dark Horse Premium is the fact that this comes standard with the drift brake, which is an electronic amalgamation of what the old brake used to look like, the old handbrake used to look like. And now it's this electric version to where it's the parking brake plus if you pull it up and just let it down, it kind of just kicks the rear end out. It's a weird thing that they got going on here. When it comes to the actual performance of the vehicle, it's a lot more on its toes and it's a lot more serious than a typical Mustang GT is. And that's a lot of the part due to the fact that it's stiffer suspension all the way around. At higher speeds and on the track, of course, that wing back there produces more downforce than even the wing on the Mustang GT Performance does, which is basically just a package you can get on a standard GT or GT Premium. And these brakes are also just gnarly. I had a donkey run out in front of me. I had to slow down. But it still faces that same transmission problem I was talking about with the last one, where if you're not on it, the upshifts can be kind of slow, but the downshifts are nice and crisp, and it sounds good. The exhaust system on this car is impeccable. It's so good. This is the best sounding 5-liter so far out of all the generations of the Coyote, and then putting it in this car plus the exhaust system on this car, it's a perfect combination. I think the biggest thing to focus on with this car when it comes to its upgrades is actually its performance when it comes to handling, rather than its performance when it comes to straight line speed, because yes, there's an additional 20 horsepower in this thing, which gives it a total bump of 50 horsepower over the last generation, but it just feels so much tighter on the front end than it typically would, even in a normal S650 Mustang GT. As standard, this gets MagneRide. The GT, you have to option that on, but the MagneRide suspension helps keep it stiff, helps with handling and balancing the car out. The MagneRide suspension is something I had in my GT from the S550 generation, and it was nice to have that. If you're looking for that bit of handling upgrade, and you're looking for an teensy amount of speed on top of the typical Mustang GT, the Dark Horse is probably where you're gonna wanna be. Plus, this is the same situation the Mach 1, the Bullet were in. This is the special Mustang GT. It's the one that makes more power than the others. Of course, first was the Bullet, then it was the Mach 1, and now it's the Dark Horse. And I hope Ford keeps this car around. Those cars had about a 3-year period that they were around for until the next version of the Mustang GT, the higher performance version, came out. So I think we'll have the Dark Horse for a couple years until Ford discontinues it, but it definitely shows that this is the most powerful and best handling Mustang GT out there, not including the GT500 and GT350s. So after driving both of them, the GT first, it's better performing than last generation's Mustang GT, which is a good thing. But if you're looking for that extra tiny bit of handling and a little bit more speed, the Dark Horse is where you're going to want to be looking. Of course, the tires are different. Of course, this has the Pirelli P0s, and these just has these regular Continental Pro Contacts. So when it comes to the handling, track performance, turn-ins, and everything like that, of course, the Dark Horse is going to be a better performer. But when it comes to just everyday living, it's not like this is going to be any worse than this one is. The real big difference is you're going to notice is when you're actually taking it out to test the performance of them. But it's not such a crazy speed difference that this is so much better, because in reality, this only makes 20 more horsepower than this one does. Actually 14, since this has the active exhaust. So it's not too crazy, but the main reason you get one of these is handling, performance, and track use. That's the main reason you'll be buying a Dark Horse. And who knows, there's also the Mustang GT Performance, which isn't that much worse than something like this. So you guys take it with a grain of salt if you'd like. For $60,000, it's only going to be worth it to some people out there. If you guys like the video, make sure you hit that like button down below. If you want to see more from us, make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next video.